Chevy Chase was born with the name Cornelius Crane Chase on October 8, 1943 in New York City. He grew up in a wealthy family that loved art, music, and books. His family gave him confidence that showed up later when he became famous. He went to fancy schools like Stockbridge School and Haverford College, where he learned to love writing and performing. At first, Chevy wanted to be a musician and played drums and piano. Learning music helped him understand timing and rhythm, which made his comedy even better later on. Before Chevy became famous, he had to work really hard in comedy. He joined a comedy group called National Lampoon, where he wrote jokes and performed on stage. Everyone could see he was talented at both writing funny stuff and making people laugh when he performed. He had a special gift that not many people have. Chevy Chase's life changed completely in 1975 when he joined the very first season of a TV show called Saturday Night Live. He became the most popular person on the show right away and helped show everyone what Saturday Night Live could become. He had a famous line he would say, "I'm Chevy Chase and you're not," which everyone started repeating. He also did the Weekend Update news segment, which created a style of making fun of the news that still happens on the show today. One of his most memorable characters was when he pretended to be President Gerald Ford and made him look clumsy and accident-prone. This was a new way of making fun of politicians on TV. Even though Chevy only stayed on SNL for one season, he already became a comedy superstar that everyone knew about. After leaving SNL, Chevy started acting in movies and became one of the biggest movie stars in the late 1970s and 1980s. He played a special kind of character, someone who was confident but also silly, someone who thought he was cool but was actually clueless, yet people still liked him anyway. His first big movie was called Foul Play in 1978, which showed he could be the main star of a movie. But the movie that really made him a legend was Caddyshack in 1980. He played a character named Ty Webb and was so funny and cool in the movie that it became super famous. People still quote lines from that movie today, and fans of all ages love it. The 1980s were the best years for Chevy's movie career. He starred in one hit movie after another, including National Lampoon's Vacation in 1983 and other vacation movies that came after. He played a character named Clark Griswold, a dad who always tries his best but everything goes wrong for him. Clark Griswold wasn't just a character. He showed what it's like to be a regular middle-class American family with all their dreams, frustrations, and hopes, but made super funny and exaggerated. Another great movie was Fletch in 1985, where Chevy showed how good he was at quick jokes and making up funny lines on the spot. He mixed talking fast with physical comedy in a way very few actors could do. But Chevy Chase's career wasn't always easy or perfect. People said he could be hard to work with because he wanted everything to be perfect and he sometimes said mean things. He got into famous arguments with other people he worked with which caused problems. Sometimes these fights got more attention than his talent, and his career had some rough times in the 1990s. But even during the quieter years, Chevy was still famous and people respected him. He came back to TV, did stage shows, and later had a big comeback when he played a character named Pierce Hawthorne on a popular TV show called Community. In that role, Chevy showed again how good his comedy timing was and reminded everyone why he became famous in the first place. In 2019, Chevy Chase made a nice surprise return to movies with The Last Laugh, a Netflix movie where he acted with another famous actor named Richard Dreyfuss. The movie told a story with humor and heart about getting older in show business. It wasn't just a silly comedy. The movie let Chevy act in a more thoughtful and emotional way that only someone with lots of experience could do. Acting with Dreyfuss, another big Hollywood star, made the movie even more special because these two famous actors worked together so naturally. It felt like they understood each other because they both had long careers in Hollywood. For fans who had loved Chevy for years, The Last Laugh felt like seeing an old friend again and reminded everyone that Chevy could be funny but also surprisingly sweet and touching. 5 years later in 2024, Chevy came back again with The Christmas Letter, a Christmas movie where he worked with other comedy actors Randy Quaid and Brian Doyle Murray. This movie brought back the nostalgic feeling that people loved from Chevy's most famous work, mixing heartfelt moments with the comedy style that made him so popular. The movie was set during Christmas, which is warm and emotional, and it let Chevy return to the kind of movies he was known for while also showing some new acting shaped by time, thinking back on his life, and really understanding the type of movies he helped make famous. Both of these recent movies showed that Chevy Chase was still appealing to audiences and proved that even after many decades of acting, he still has the charm and star power to entertain people of all ages. Chevy Chase's personal life, just like his acting career, has had different chapters that show different times of growing up, having big dreams and finally finding stability. His early marriages happened when his career was taking off really fast, while his later family life shows a time when things became more settled and lasting. Chevy's first marriage was to Susan Hewitt, and they got married in New York City on February 23, 1973. At that time, Chevy was just starting to become famous and was working hard to become a writer and comedian. New York was where he was learning comedy and getting better at performing right before his big break on Saturday Night Live. They got married during a time when Chevy was under a lot of pressure, and his life was changing a lot as he tried to make it in the entertainment business. But the marriage didn't last long. After less than 3 years, they got divorced on February 1, 1976. Their marriage ended right when Chevy was becoming famous, which shows how hard it can be to keep a relationship going when you suddenly become successful and everyone knows who you are. Later that same year, Chevy got married for the second time, this time to an actress named Jacqueline Carlin. They got married on December 4, 1976, when Chevy was quickly becoming super famous because of Saturday Night Live and his movie career. Jacqueline was also working in Hollywood and had been in movies like The Candidate and Thank God It's Friday. Their marriage showed two people whose lives were both in the entertainment world. Even though they both worked in the same business, they had problems, and they got divorced on November 14, 1980. They didn't have any kids together. This second divorce happened during another big change in Chevy's life, right when he was becoming one of the most popular comedy actors in Hollywood. During the 1980s, Chevy lived in Pacific Palisades, Los Angeles, in a special Tudor-style house from 1980 until 1995. This was when he was at the peak of his popularity and starred in lots of successful movies, including the National Lampoon's Vacation movies and other big comedies. He lived in Pacific Palisades, which is a nice coastal neighborhood with wealthy people, and this showed both how successful he was and that he wanted a stable home even though Hollywood life was crazy. He didn't just live there, he was part of the community. From 1986 to 1988, Chevy was the honorary mayor of Pacific Palisades, which was mostly just a fun title but showed how visible and popular he was in the neighborhood. The position showed that he wanted to be involved in the local community and that even though he was famous, he still had a sense of humor and was friendly with the people who lived there. Chevy's third marriage turned out to be the longest and most important one of his life. On June 19, 1982, he married Janie Luke in Pacific Palisades. This relationship was a turning point because it brought him more personal stability and lasted longer than his earlier marriages. Over the years, Chevy and Janie built a family together and had 3 daughters, Sydney, Callie, and Emily. Being a father became a really important part of who Chevy was, and it helped balance out the demands of his career and the pressures he felt during his earlier years of being famous. Unlike his earlier relationships, this marriage lasted through both the good times and the hard times in his career, including when he was super successful and when he had public and private challenges. Eventually, Chevy and his family moved to Bedford, New York, where they still live. Moving away from Los Angeles showed that he wanted a quieter, more normal life, far away from the constant attention and fast pace of Hollywood. Bedford gave them privacy and a focus on family life and thinking about life, which let Chevy be a husband and father while still staying connected to his career. This final part of his personal life shows he found stability and balance, which is very different from the rough times he had earlier, and it shows how Chevy Chase grew not just as a performer but as a person. At 82 years old, Chevy Chase has reached a time in his life where looking back and thinking about the past comes more easily than competing with others, and being honest matters more than keeping up old Hollywood stories. He's known as one of the most influential original cast members of Saturday Night Live, but he also has a reputation for being difficult, blunt, and saying whatever he thinks. These qualities have been part of both his comedy and his personal relationships. One of the most famous and long-running of those are relationships is his rough history with another comedian named Bill Murray. Now, with many decades between the crazy times of their early careers and today, Chevy has finally talked openly about how he really sees Murray and their famous fight. Chevy doesn't pretend the tension between them never happened. In fact, he talks about it honestly, saying that from the beginning, Bill and he were never really alike. Even though people thought they were similar, they were competing for the same space, the same laughs, the same attention. That kind of situation brings out the worst in people. Both men came from the high-pressure environment of early SNL, where big egos clashed every day and you had to stand out to survive. Chevy was the breakout star of the show's first season and left early to go to Hollywood, while Murray came soon after and quickly became a huge presence on the show. That change alone created resentment, misunderstanding, and rivalry. Looking back, Chevy admits that pride played a big role for both of them. I was arrogant back then, I won't deny it, but Bill had his own edge too. He could be confrontational, sharp, and unpredictable. When two people like that meet, it's going to explode at some point. One of those explosions famously happened backstage at SNL in 1978, an incident that became a legend in comedy. For years, people told the story as proof that they hated each other forever. Chevy now sees it differently and more humanly. It wasn't some lifelong hatred. It was two guys saying things they shouldn't have said in a room that was already full of stress and resentment. Getting older has made Chevy see things more softly. Instead of focusing on who was to blame, he now talks about the situation they were in. He explains that the comedy world of the 1970s and 1980s rewarded being aggressive and acting tough. You were expected to be tough to fight for your spot. Nobody was talking about feelings or mental health. We were just trying to survive and be funny. In that environment, misunderstandings quickly turned into grudges, and people rarely apologized. Chevy thinks that if the same things happened today, they might have been solved privately instead of becoming famous stories. Despite everything that happened, Chevy doesn't deny that Murray is talented or important. Actually, he's surprisingly nice in what he says about him. Bill is one of the great comic actors of our time, there's no question about that. He brought something completely new to comedy, an irony, a looseness that audiences hadn't really seen before. Chevy makes it clear that he always respected Murray's work professionally, even when they didn't get along personally. The problem, he says, was never about talent, but about their personalities. In his final thoughts, Chevy sounds less angry and more thoughtful about life. Life's too short to carry this stuff forever. We were young, we were competitive, and we were famous before we understood what that meant. If people want a villain and a hero, they won't find one here. Just two flawed guys who made comedy history and didn't always get along. At 82, Chevy Chase isn't interested in keeping old stories going anymore. Instead, he offers something more rare than gossip: perspective, taking responsibility, and quietly admitting that time changes even the most stubborn truths.